years, we had significant number of vacancies, and we've done a very good job now that we're fully staffed up filling those vacancies. So we've a plus 20 positions now in the city have been filled over the last year, which is pretty good. And we're working very hard on the tougher ones like EMS and police. And you will see that two of the major changes that we've requested in the budget have to do, one of those has to do with recruitment. And we've asked for, there's another $15,000 addition in the budget. And that is, one of those is for recruitment. And the recruitment is right now being tested with the police department. We have contracted out with our police app. Police app is the app that we use for, and really everybody uses, for hiring police officers. And we have actually contracted with them deeper to go in to use their data to identify more likely candidates and market to them more directly. And it's not exactly cheap, but so far it has shown some great promise. I think between that and the going back to the pension, I think is really making a significant difference. This is all, just, this is not deep analysis, but before the last 4 or 5 tests we've done, we've gotten between 6 and 8 candidates, and we have currently 26 candidates that are eligible to take the exam. We're going to have an exam in May. So we think that is a direct result of the pension being returned, plus our increased efforts in mining the data to directly market the people that have a greater potential for wanting to be a police officer in Trumbull. So that's kind of that $15,000 that you're seeing in the budget is kind of us trying to take that to the next level next year, not just for police, but to then use that and branch out to other difficult to hire jobs. EMS is extremely difficult and competitive these days, and also all the technical positions in the city, like for instance, sanitarian and jobs like that. We have a WPCA job that's up now. Those more technical niche type jobs are very difficult to hire. And so we're going to start taking, hopefully, if you approve this money, take some of this money and start doing some more data mining with the organizations. Obviously, Police App won't be the one we use, but governmentjobs.com is another group we use. CCM is a group that we can use that they keep track of that kind of stuff, and then they help us market directly to people that are more likely to be interested in the job instead of like the Indeed world of just mass, scattershot. So that's what that $15,000 is for, and we would ask for that to help keep us up to pace with what other communities are doing, because the reality of the world is that hiring is extremely competitive now, and so we have to up our game a little bit. The second addition to our budget is another $15,000. This is for OSHA, and I don't know if you have heard, but we had we won the lottery, and we're in OSHA inspection. We had a full town inspection for OSHA this year. This is not anything we did wrong. There was no violation they came for. They literally choose a number of towns and cities out of a hat every year. And we, as I said, we won the lottery. So they come in and they choose a number of departments and they dig deep. And I say they dig deep, they dig deep. And so we've spent the last few months dealing with that inspection, and there's been a number of things that have been brought up. And so you guys very nicely, actually the Board of Finance approved for us to have money this year to hire a consultant, and our goal would be to continue to have a consultant that focuses directly on this for the town. It is something, there's 2 things to think about when you're thinking about the $15,000. Number one is that safety of the employees has got to be the number one thing on our minds at all times. It is, if you see things about, employees getting caught in ditches collapsing, things like that, that is the type of stuff that we work very hard to make sure we're never in that place. And so in order to do that, you need to have someone who is knowledgeable in the intricacies of OSHA regulations in Connecticut and paying attention on a regular basis. Now, our office is doing our best to pay attention, but I'm going to be very honest with you. We are not experts in the intricacies of Connecticut OSHA or federal OSHA guidelines. It It is extremely complex. So that's what we're asking for, someone that would be our regular consultant on this, so that when we have confined space training, we have someone to go to do the training, but also to do the training in a way that coordinates with what ConOSHA expects of us. So those are the only two big changes in our budget. The other stuff is increases in software costs and things like that.
Any questions?
So is the OSHA, that's a state agency, or is that the federal agency that's coming in?
So we deal with ConOSHA here in municipal level, but the ConOSHA is like a combination of the federal OSHA standards combined with the ConOSHA standards, and many times ConOSHA goes above what the federal OSHA is asking for.
And so this consultant is a Connecticut-based consulting agency?
It is, yes.
And so,
Well, to be very fair, the current one we have PMA right now.
Okay.
They're our current consultants. We would have to, if you approve this money, we would go to bid and hire a consultant. So I couldn't tell you who they're going to be, but we would want very clearly in our bid, we would want someone who has experience in a relationship with ConOSHA.
and so if you put it to bid, how many, what would be the how many possible consultants are there in the state?
There aren't a lot of people that do this.
Okay.
So I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to guess you're probably in the 3 to 4 range, and some better than others, and some have better expertise than others.
And so is that better expertise more expensive? Will we be coming back for more money?
So I'm going to be honest, the 15,000 is a bit of a guesstimate on
Okay.
our part, but it's a guesstimate based on the consultants we have right now. So we kind of have a sense of what they're charging. They generally, it seems they charge per hour, and so that'd be something that we would manage out of the office. But built into that is a certain number of trainings too. So, so this is a good guesstimate.
Okay. Thanks.
I feel like this is kind of a position that could pay for itself, right? I mean, if we're really focused on safety in town, that, we might not be paying out as much in disability and, workman's comp, et cetera, down the road, correct? Is that how you view this as?
Yes, this is absolutely an investment in not just safety, but also town finances. I mean, you're exactly correct. One bad incident could, not only would it be terrible to have any incident that would hurt an employee, in addition to that, it would be very expensive very quickly. And so 15,000 is really a drop in the bucket with the potential of what you could be paying if we have a bad incident.
One question. Go ahead.
You mentioned Indeed. Back to the question of recruitment. Do you actually use Indeed for looking for candidates?
In a limited way, in a very limited way. We without giving, I don't want to cast aspersions, we don't find them to be helpful
Okay.
in our regular hirings. And they're not, we don't think they're as good on the government side.
Okay.
But there are particular things that we might use Indeed for, certain positions, like finance might be something that we would use. If we had a big finance job, Indeed might be a better source for us.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question for me. In thinking about labor negotiations, how many contracts are you negotiating, do you plan for this year?
I can actually provide you, if you want, I can give you the summary, and if you want, I could email it to everybody, or you can make copies or whatever you want to do.
Email
Yeah,
would be fine.
I could do that.
Yep.
So this is where we are right now. We have 4 open contracts currently. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a spoiler. At your next meeting, next town council meeting in May, you're gonna see at least 1 TA, possibly 2, because I signed a TA today, and so so the mate contract, I can tell you, has a tentative agreement. There's another contract that we haven't signed yet, so I can't tell you who it is, but it's one of the ones that's coming. And so I'm hoping by Monday I'll have that signed. We're just doing language now. So 2 of those 4 are pretty close to done. And then we have the DPW bargaining unit. DPW bargaining unit took a vote midstream of the negotiations to change their union representation. And so it has put a bit of a wrench into our negotiations. We are now negotiating about the negotiations, and I have confidence that we're going to get it on track and solve that relatively soon. But the operators and engineers union has taken over that contract, so they're getting up to speed, and we're working on that. We also have a brand new union in town, the non-supervisory EMS union. So it only represents the small number of people. I think it's 6 or 7 people who are not the supervisors and not per diem in EMS. So the full-time non-supervisory folks, generally the full-time EMTs and mostly paramedics. So they have formed a union, and so we don't even have a contract yet with them. I've met with them a number of times. They're putting together their version of what they would like a contract to look like, and we haven't even submitted that stuff yet. So we're working on that.
And for the 2 that are open, the 2, you anticipate if everything goes smoothly, they should be done this year as well, as best as you know right now.
When you say this year, do you mean calendar year?
A fiscal.
I would not hold my breath on fiscal.
Okay.
For the other 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. That was not me. It was really.
We will move to Board of Ed.
I didn't do it. I swear to you, I didn't do it.
Make sure all day first, so. We're gonna switch right over. Thank you.
Like hand stuff.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see everyone here this evening, and it's appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you tonight and share some of our budget. I know you've had our budget binder, which has got the whole 5.34% increase that we were requesting, over $6 million. So that's been available for a long time. So what I wanted to try to do tonight is focus on just a few items. I believe Lara's going to try to bring this up on the computer. I think I have it connected, but here in Town Hall, oh, she's a whiz. So my goal is I gave you there's many slides, like about 29 slides there. I'm not going to go through each of those. I'm going to actually focus on just a few of them. So what I'm hoping to be able to do tonight in the presentation part is to really make sure I convince you that you should fully endorse the 4% that Ms. Tesoro put into her budget and that the Board of Finance supported as well. I'm hoping you also recognize the challenges we're now facing in the 23-24 budget, because our budgeting has become much more tight, and therefore when challenges come upon us, and I'll explain what some of those challenges are, it impacts us. And then I'll talk more about how those pieces are impacting the 24-25 budget, and how even the 4% increase will still come with some challenges in May, when I have to work with the Board of Education and identify certain items to be reduced from the Board of Ed approved budget. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish during this presentation. Then, of course, we want to answer any questions that you folks have. So does that work? Yes, it does. All right, perfect. So, oh, she's back. So some of these slides are pretty quick. Just the whole idea of our mission. These are all kind of slides that have been in each of our presentations, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about each of them. To us, they're important slides, but just for time element, I'm going to move through them. But we really do believe that our budgeting process is quite reflective. We're always focused on goals. We have a vision of the graduate for all children who graduate from Trumbull Public Schools. That was adopted by the Board of Education in May of 2022. I want to start on this particular slide where we talk about some of the key factors in planning. And so I've highlighted some of those in yellow that I want to talk about this evening. Some of our key factors are, we know that the ARP ESSER funding is coming to an end, not just in Trumbull Public Schools, but across all of, not even just Connecticut schools, but across the nation. The ARP grants are done on, I think it's September 30th, 2024. But so we're going to have completely spent our money by the end of this particular school year. So it's really important to note, and I'll show in some slides later, that over the past, when we received that money from the ESSER grant, we had a plan for going into the 24-25 school year. And we've been showing that plan, how we were supporting our students at a high level when we were coming out of the pandemic, and then we were tapering down that support as we were coming through the pandemic and finishing up with the money. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. But we had a plan. We talked about landing the plane and tapering down those funds, and going into the 24-25 year, that's the case. In terms of legislative mandates on the right-hand side, you've probably read a little bit about the science of reading and how the State Department of Education is now, through state statute really, so it was done by the legislation group, that we have to bring in what's called the science of reading. I could do a whole 45 minutes on science of reading, so I won't do that. And Dr. Iwaniki could probably do 2 hours on it, so won't do that to you. But we're very supportive of the idea of making sure all of our children can read. And the science of reading has research and support for how to make sure we can do that. We're not in love with the way the state legislators put it together because the timeline is very challenging. It doesn't give districts an opportunity to phase ourselves into that. But there are costs with that. And financial literacy, which probably many of you support, being on the finance committee of the town council, but it's a requirement now for all students graduating from Connecticut high schools. I applaud it. I think kids should have a good financial background. I think it sets them up for success in the future if they understand how what they do as a 20-year-old impacts them as a 50-year-old. But it does come it's a requirement for all students in the class of 2027. So those students are currently freshmen. So you'll see later how there's some additional requests for staff at the high school, and that's part of it. In terms of increased operating costs, our transportation costs, we had a new contract going into this year, and we budgeted appropriately for it. But unfortunately, it seems like Durham, our bus company, has really paid attention to the fine writing in their contract, and they're charging us for everything they possibly can. So our costs have actually gone up a bit to the tune of about $200,000 in this year's budget. And we've fought them on many things they've done, and we've reduced certain pieces, but there's certain parts that are absolutely in the contract. We've absolutely signed on that contract, and it's been in our previous contracts. They're now just charging us for them. So as a business, that makes sense for them, but as us, for budgeting, it makes things challenging. We all know about our master plan, and the aging of our building is causing more and more complications for our budgeting, because as homeowners, we know that the water heater can break, and that stinks, and we got to fix that, or we have to proactively fix it when it gets to a certain age. But when you have 1.5 million square feet of building, a lot can happen, and it's very difficult to know what is going to happen. So that aging buildings process is costing us more and more each year. And then absences, I think we see across, probably most just organizations and businesses, absences have increased. And it's no different in education. teacher absences, staff absences have increased, and therefore our sub costs have also increased. So those are some of the key factors we had to pay attention to, plus some of those other items I didn't highlight for sake of time. I want to talk a little bit about what constituted our 5.34% increase that the Board of Ed adopted. I don't know how much you've been paying attention to the excess cost reimbursement piece that's been going on at the state, but I'll share a little bit of information. We receive a grant from the state. Every public school does, and it's where you receive money back from the state when you spend more than 4.5 times your net child cost per student. So in our terms, our net cost per student is about $18,000, 18 and some change. So 4.5 times that ends up being about $82,000. So once we've spent $82,000 on a child, one child, for their education in that particular year, the state has a fund that they're supposed to reimburse you for the excess cost. That's why it's called the excess cost fund. Now, they fund it. They say, this year we're going to put $250 million into this account. How much was it this year? 181 million that they said they're going to put into the account this year. And then all of us school districts say, well, here's all of our students that we spent, and we track every one of these children that we spend over 82,000. It's actually quite a bit of work to do. And we submit it to the state and say, here's all the kids that we spent more money on, and here's the money we should get back. Traditionally, the legislation says we're supposed to get 100% back. We traditionally get about 72% back. This year, even though we budget for about 71% back, we're only getting 67% back. And interestingly enough, the state legislators had changed the number to say that they were going to give us 85%. So I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers out there, but they were telling us to expect 85%. They put $250 million in the account. All the districts in Connecticut actually asked for $330 million back. And so then they said, okay, well, state legislation says we proportionally dole out the money then. So you don't get your 85, you don't even get your 72. This year you get 67%. So the difference between 85% of our money and 67% is $500,000. So we were not expecting all 500 this year. We were expecting more about, I think we were expecting about 2.1, and we're getting 1.9 million back. So that's a $200,000 hole. That makes budgeting for education very challenging. And what's frustrating to me as a superintendent and as a taxpayer, where does that burden shift to? It shifts away from the state and it shifts to all the local taxpayers. And so I actually sent a note to all of our reps today saying, here is what's happening. You're still in session. You need to do something about this because you're affecting every single local town. And my pessimistic, cynical part believes they're doing that all on purpose because they've been trying to shift money to town taxpayers, and this is one way that they're doing it. So, but it makes it very difficult for ourselves to budget. So you can see that difference between 69 and 85%. Medical insurance, I'll talk about a little bit later. One thing I didn't highlight here that I wanted to highlight for you folks, staff turnover. So that 750,000 in that second bullet there, I should have highlighted that in yellow. When I came here as superintendent, they were budgeting about $300,000 to $350,000 for staff turnover. What that essentially means is when somebody retires at a higher salary and you expect to bring somebody in at a lesser amount, you expect there to be some savings. And you do your best to try to calculate how many people are at retirement age or close to it, and are they in hard to fill positions. At the end of the day, we were noticing in my last few years here that 300,000 was not high enough, which was causing there to be excess money in our salary accounts. So bottom line is this year we're up to 750,000. We think that is probably our ceiling at this point, and we'll continue to pay attention to it. But my point of pointing this out is we're trying to accurately budget as accurately as we can. Went from 350 originally to I think 600s in our current budget, and then we're moving to 750 for next year. Makes me a little nervous, makes me sweat a little bit because it is getting harder and harder to replace teachers, so we tend to be stealing them from other districts. They want to work here in Trumbull, but they may not be new teachers. So that delta between who's leaving and who's coming in may not be as big. So I want to point that out. So I do sweat about some of this stuff, but we're trying to make sure that we're very accurate with how much we need for our budget. So anyway, those were some of the pieces in our 24-25 budget. Some additional assumptions in our 24-25 budget is, like I said, maintaining the critical staff that's in the ESSER grant. The 24-25 budget provided students with an additional STEM teacher, because that's a requirement for high school graduation and personal finance. We are trying to fund that gap that's in strings and bands and elite, but it does not eliminate the pay to play for strings and band. So those are some of the other major things that we had to budget for. We also put some money in for the conversation about Lead School Start. You see that at the bottom of $500,000, and you see that we put in 4.5% increase for our transportation contract. We really do believe that our budget is lean. I know that a $6 million increase doesn't feel lean. It doesn't feel lean to me either as a taxpayer, but we are not looking to make huge increases to the number of staff in order to do this. Our teachers did awesome work during the pandemic, but they've done even better work post-pandemic as we've really eliminated learning loss for our students coming out of the pandemic. I think you know that most of our budget is about people. 81% of our budget is salaries and benefits. We're a people-driven organization. And we learned during the pandemic that sitting behind a computer is not the way to teach a 7-year-old. Some kids may thrive on online learning, but they also need that interaction with an adult. And so it's no surprise that most of our budget is people, salaries, and benefits. And that little tiny part of the bottom future-ready initiatives is just 1% of our budget. Everything else really comes down to requirements and contractual obligations, things like transportation, power, things to keep the lights on. I mentioned net cost per child before. You see that Trumbull spends about $18,500 on the net cost. I show this because I believe we're being very efficient. When you look at how Trumbull spends versus other districts, you see that we're very efficient. This also helps us when you think about what I mentioned before on excess cost. 4.5 times Region 9's salary net cost means that, what is that, 4.5 times 30, right? I'm doing math up quick, but it's over $120,000. I can tell you that. It's probably like $135,000, right? So in Region 9, they actually have to spend $135,000 before they start accumulating excess cost. Here it's 82, I think we said. So there is some definite benefit for being frugal. But so we do actually are able to get more money back than, say, a Region 9 in terms of their special ed costs. Our student enrollment if you look, it has gone up slightly over the past number of years, essentially stabilized recently. I also think it's important that we show this slide every year, this slide on our elementary. Every year we do projections based on how big our class sizes are expected to be at the elementary schools. And through that, I help identify if we can reduce certain sections or if we have to increase sections. So you see a bunch of downward arrows, meaning a reduction, a plus meaning I have to add a section. The net of all this work at the elementary school is we put in our budget a reduction of 4 elementary teachers. That's built into our 24-25. We don't believe we'll have to reduce any actual people because we have a number of retirements at the elementary level, so no one's going to lose their job. But this is another way to show, like, I'm not just putting these staff back into the buildings and just kind of, I could tuck them away if you wanted me to, but I'm showing that we have savings here, and we're taking those savings so that we can make sure the rest of the budget, we can get the things we actually need. And one of those things that we actually need that we talked a lot about to the Board of Finance is our literacy coaches and math coaches. So we had like 8 slides at the Board of Finance meeting for those of you who were in attendance about this. And we also had our program leader for math and our program leader for literacy talk about the importance of these coaches and how they're helping students reduce the gap in learning and helping staff make sure that the tier 1 instruction they're doing in their classroom is really high class, and the teachers appreciate that support, and it goes hand in hand in helping sure that all of our students are learning. And if you want me to slow down at any point, I certainly can. I know I'm going through this quickly, but I'll stop. And this was the plan we put together. This is a document we actually put together back in my first year here. It was like October of 2020. We're in the middle of the pandemic, trying to come out of it, and we are showing people how we're using the ARP ESSER grant money and what our plan is to taper it down. So now as we go into 24-25, the biggest important column to look at is the grant funded on the very far right side. In 24-25, you are going to have your Title I schools have additional staff because of the Title I funding we get. And that was always present. When those schools have been Title I schools, that funding was there. But you see the rest of those areas are zero. We will have no other grant-funded positions when we're done here. So you won't have to see this chart anymore after this year because we won't have this grant funding anymore. But we've been tapering down, and we really feel we've hit the sweet spot of how many coaches we have in our elementary buildings and middle schools. We feel like the 2 literacy coaches for almost all elementary buildings and the 1 math coach is really what's critical. Frenchtown and Middlebrook have slightly more on the math because of their Title I school status. And we would love to put more support at the secondary level because there's not enough support there for students who are struggling. But we want to make sure we close the gaps for elementary kids, because if you reduce the gaps for elementary kids, it only helps the middle school and high school teachers along the way. I'd rather close those gaps when those kids are young than try to close things when they're 15, 16 years old. Because if you've ever had a 15 or 16-year-old, you know it can be challenging. So I'd rather get them when they're 6 or 7 years old. So this brings us to that end of the tapering process for the 24-25 year. Some of the net and some of the certified staffing changes that we're making, you saw the reduction of 4 elementary FTEs. We're reducing a special education chair of elementary and special education resource. We're reducing that to actually add it later as an administrative position because it really does, it's very valuable to our district, and a 10-month position at a teacher level does not have the same ability to accomplish what we need to accomplish as an administrator in that position. The 2 high school positions, one's for tech ed, because we need enough STEM courses for high school graduation requirements. The other one is that business class so we can teach personal finance and make sure all the kids graduate with that particular course. The 4 literacy consultants all come out of the ESSER grant. We've been moving them out of the ESSER grant. We need to move those 4 over. The 1 language arts team leader, that's ESSER grant. The 0.5 English language teacher, that's the ESSER grant currently. And then you have a growing bilingual population in Trumbull, and so we have requirements to make sure that we have staffing available to teach kids who are bilingual. So that is all in the budget, in the 24-25 budget, as well as the administrator positions. We have a mental health supervisor, and people know how important mental health has become for our children. And like I mentioned, the 1.0 supervisor of elementary special education. So this lays out specifically the staff changes that are in our budget for 24-25. Technology was always an important conversation. We did great work this year meeting our year one goals for technology. We've upgraded all those items on that sheet for 23-24. We have $648,000, I think, is the number in technology for the 24-25 budget. So we're happy about the progress we're making with technology. I've shared this slide before. It basically shows that a couple of years ago, inflation overtook our increases at the Board of Education. Just more of a factual piece of information, because beforehand our budget increases were above CPI, and then all of a sudden we're below the CPI. And we all know what's been going on with inflation, of course. And you see that healthcare, which we put out there separately, has been skyrocketing for education, like it probably has been skyrocketing in areas of industry that you may be working. And there could be different reasons why it's harder to contain insurance costs in a public sector than it would be in perhaps a private sector. We did want to address a little bit this idea of our available balance. So sometimes people call it surplus, but it's technically called the available balance. So Mr. Hendrickson has said on multiple occasions it costs $500,000 to run a day of school in Trumbull Public Schools, which is like, wow, that's eye-popping, right? Like $500,000? Yep, just went again. We know we also, as a Board of Education, cannot deficit spend. I can't end the year at -$1. I have to end above, I have to be at 0 or above. Our current available balance, and you would not have seen this officially yet, but it's going to come out in the March financial report. We're at -70 for available balance for the rest of this year. That's why it's becoming a little harder for me to sleep, because that's below 0. I also want to point out that -70, that's a business office prediction. I meet with Paul once a week, and we sit down and we do this. And as we get closer to the end of the year, we do more of this. That -70 includes the $435,000 that we identified from the non-lapsing account for this year's budget. If you go back to our board meetings, May meeting from 2023, I identified what we're going to do to balance the 23-24 budget. The top line says we're going to use $435,000 out of the non-lapsing account. So that -70 identifies is using $435,000 from that. So because of this, I froze the Long Hill budget back in March, on March 25th, and I froze all budgets on April 1st. That means anything that anybody wants to purchase that was not already put into an encumbrance has to go through Paul's office. So his office got a lot busier because we're really slowing down the spending to make sure that we're not buying things that can wait, because I can't be at -70. And at the same time, I've got Dave Cody, who you may know as our Director of Operations, coming to me and saying, hey, the AgSci elevator, they had to do a test on it that the state required us to do. And when they did it, they broke, and they said it could break, it broke the cylinder on it. That's a $10,000 repair. Like $13,000 repair. I can't say no to fixing that. I have to fix that because there's kids on crutches. I think we even have a pregnant teacher over there. So we have to fix certain things. And you see the other pieces here. So my point is that we have tight budgets. And the other thing I'll point out about this is, because we're being very cautious right now, things could get brighter, which, knock on wood, they will, and I'll start to gain a little bit more of a surplus of an available balance so that I'm not at 0. So trying to land a ship that's $119 million where you can't spend even $1 more than what you budgeted is challenging. And so I just want to point that out, that our budget is tight, and I'm not here saying doom and gloom, but that's my current reality. And When April's done and we sit down and look at the April financials, I'll either be my tick will come back, or I'll start to feel a little bit better that the things we're doing are trying to really slow down the spending. I don't want you to worry though. All the kids have what they need: toilet paper, the things that you need to run a school on a daily basis are present. So I don't want anybody to say that that's not occurring. So last year, the Board of Ed approved a 4.98. We received 3.3. I told you already, we earmarked the 435. How did we balance the budget? We used the non-lapsing account. I know it's been a big conversation piece. If you read Bridgeport, if you read the newspaper, Bridgeport's talking about using some of its $36 million non-lapsing account. So I just want to point out there that I don't have a large non-lapsing account. When they say they have to go to their savings, that's what they mean by that. We eliminated talented and gifted. We reduced a math specialist last year. We reduced high school electives. We reduced an elementary music teacher. Yep. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm on a roll, Ashley.
Only because you were talking about the 36 million that
Yeah.
Bridgeport has.
Yeah.
What's the balance on our non-lapsing?
It's
you know right
currently
now?
it's like 700 and something thousand dollars. But when I use the
750, okay.
750 or
50
something,
and
yeah.
then minus
If
what
I-
you're saying is
If we in
potentially a
fact use
435.
that 435, it's going to be that delta.
Whatever that ends
Yeah.
up being. 635, 735, $315,000, something
So,
like that.
Paul, Mr. Hendrickson saying I have $751,413 in the non-lapsing account. But again, knowing that I said for 23-24 we were going to use 435, 553 to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have an idea
Yep.
because you've mentioned that account twice, and so I was
Yep.
curious what the updated number was.
Yep.
Thank you. Keep going on a roll.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
The non-lapsing account is the surpluses from the years prior.
Yep. There was, it was 1 year prior. So during the COVID years, there was certain bills we didn't have to pay. Transportation comes to mind as one of them. We were able to get some reductions from places like a transportation contract. So we were able to, I think, put about $901,000 into a non-lapsing account. So that was agreed to. And so that money has been there, and we've spent some of it on, I think it was technology. 150,000 on technology. But then we've been fortunate enough that we keep ending the year in the black, and so we haven't had to use non-lapsing account. And we don't just spend to spend. And so, and I know there's different people and different perspectives on non-lapsing and all that. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to spend something to spend it. So we plan on using the 435 this year. I would love to use less. I'll be frank and honest. I don't want to use $435,000 to fill in a gap, but it's there, and we'll certainly use that. And these are the other reductions we had to make last year to make the 23-24 budget be balanced. So going into this year, so I thought you might want to know, well, if we receive the 4.0% increase this year, how might you balance the budget? So I want to walk you through this one a little bit. A 4% budget increase for the Board of Education is still a $1.6 million reduction from the Board of Ed approved budget. I recognize a 4% increase is an increase to our budget. I get it. It's a sizable amount, and it's an appreciable amount. But it would mean us going back and finding $1.6 million in reductions. We also, as I mentioned, have this bus contract this year that's costing me $200,000 more than we had budgeted for. Well, I can't look the other way for next year, and so now for 24-25 budget, I have to look to be upping that bus number by that $200,000. Otherwise, I'm building in a hole to my budget. And then the substitute count. That one's been interesting because if you go back to the years 18, 19, 17, 18, we spent about $1.3 million on substitutes. But then over the past couple of years, it had reduced down to about $1 million. So when we budgeted for 24-25, we put $1 million in. But if you remember, we always budget in October. And so we didn't even have all the final actuals from the year we were in. So we didn't even know what our 22-23 actuals were when we were budgeting for 23-24. So we actually spent in 22-23 $1.3 million. If I had known that for 23-24, I probably would have budgeted more. And I think we should have put more money into that budget for 24-25. You know, I can take responsibility for not seeing that and not looking at a bigger 6-year perspective on that. But now that we did see it, we can't ignore that. Otherwise, we're building in a hole there. So therefore, we need to cut about $2.1 million from our 24-25 Board of Ed approved budget. So we would start by eliminating the funds for a late school start because the board hasn't even voted on that. That was put in there for conversation. If that conversation really picked up and we had made a move, we would need some money for additional buses. And we worked closely with Mr. Soro's office back and forth on not on late school start, but on the insurance piece. We left the state partnership plan 2 years ago because the state partnership plan increased rates by 10%. We got out, went to United Healthcare. For the past 2 years, we've been in United Healthcare. We saved about $1.4 million by getting out and getting into UHC. But now our rates have been, our usage has been terrible, and they want to give us the 39% increase to our rates. That's not good. And so our claims to our premiums was it 39% over?
132% of claims versus premium.
132%. So they're like, we can't afford you guys to be continuing to pay these claims. So our broker went out, found different options for us, and the state partnership plan has actually started to make some real positive progress. So now we can actually go back to the state partnership plan and from our 24-25 budget, which we budgeted a 10% increase, we can save $1 million. I say save, but it's really cost avoidance, $1 million there. So that's 1.5 million of the 2.1 I need to find. The rest of the reductions would be really trying to push on our legislators to make sure excess cost comes in higher, because any dollars that comes back in excess cost would be beneficial to the town. We were hoping to start rugby and a middle school track and field program for next year. We would have to eliminate that. You may have heard stuff about hygiene dispensers in schools for next year. I've got a much reduced plan. I don't need to go with the Cadillac version of that. We would reduce about $100,000 from technology. We would eliminate that new bilingual staff. I'd have to probably take out one position at the high school. And we'd have to look at potential reductions to our literacy and math coaching. It's kind of like in priority order for me. And keep in mind, I don't get the final say on this list. These are things that I'd be recommending to the Board of Education in order to balance their budget. But they know we have a good sense of what we think impacts the kids most and least, and we're going to always try to find things that impact the kids least in our reductions. So I don't want you to think like 4% puts me on easy street, because it doesn't, but I do think that 4%, given where taxpayers are and just the economy in general, is a fair number. I would love you guys to wholeheartedly endorse that to the full town council. We would love to add additional things that these are not in our budget currently, and I'm getting to the end here. I'll go through a couple of these quicker. Did your money get us results? Absolutely. We spent about $18,500 for our students, and our accountability score was 85.17. Sorry, I moved a few slides ahead there, Anya. But you can see how much other schools, districts are spending per kids and their accountability score from the state. And you can see we're number 7, and we're spending less than all of them. And in some cases, far less. And this is per kid. So just take 8,000 kids, 7,000 children, and multiply it times that delta, and you can see what an increase we would be looking at. So final thoughts. We provide a very high quality education in Trumbull. The majority of our budget pays for people. We've been very transparent with our use of ESSER funds throughout these past 3 years. as a district, we use leading and lagging data to try to figure out what we need to do to help kids learn and achieve at high levels. We've always budget on our priorities, and Trumbull students are achieving at high levels. So I appreciate the time that you took to listen, and I hope there was some information in there that you found useful. And I have myself and Mr. Hendrickson, Dr. Iwaniki, Mr. Chella, who's our HR director here to answer questions. We also have a number of our board members who could make it tonight. I see Ms. Heffley is also here, our Director of Digital Learning. So we're happy to answer any questions at this point.
Hey, Dr. Semmel. We talk in reference to percentages. What is the actual increase in dollars?
The 4% or the
4%.
I don't have this in this slide. Paul, you have that, right?
1.603046 million.
Reduced, yeah, but I think you're asking for the actual increase that 4% would get us to.
I'm just asking what the actual dollar amount
Yeah,
is.
I can actually tell you. Yeah.
4.8.
If you-
Somewhere around 4.8 million, something like that.
Yeah, it's 6.4 million minus the 1.6 million. Yeah, so about 4.8 million dollars.
Thanks for that. And also, I'll just ask a couple and then let other people ask. What do you, your insurance is, you're budgeting for 10. What are you expecting it to come in at?
Yeah, so when we
And when do you
budget,
expect to get that number?
we expect, we anticipated the 10%, but we're actually going to come in at about
4.6.
4.65%.
It all depends upon 4.65 given current population and the usage throughout the district.
Which is why we're anticipating we can save that $1 million that you saw on that slide. We can take $1 million off because it's less than the 10% that we budgeted for.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
For now, thanks.
Yep.
Sorry. For transportation, is that amount based on going over the 5 hours?
That's part of it. Yeah, so that's part of our pushback because they were telling us more of our buses were going over 5 hours, and we spent a good 2 months looking at very specific data about our bus travel, and it's portal to portal when they leave their bus station to returning. So that's part of it. The other part that was frustrating to us is they used to charge us. A number of our special ed buses that bring children to outplacements they have to have a monitor on them. So they were only charging us for about 2 hours a day, the time to go down and the time to come back. But the contract allows them to do it for the entire day. So they started charging us for the entire day. That's about $100,000+ increase.
$160,000 increase this year on a $277,000 budget.
Glad you brought them.
Yeah.
So are we going to be looking at, can transportation look, and I discussed at the Board of Finance, a way to reduce that number of hours? Some less stops perhaps if they are too close? Getting there, I know like at Hillcrest, when you go by a half an hour before the students are out, the buses are all sitting there.
Right.
Are there ways to get that back to the 5 hours so that we're not being overcharged?
And that's what we've actually been doing. So yeah, we're being, while we were auditing, they're saying that there were 6 hour runs.
Yeah.
We had buses sitting in spots outside the portal, and we were like, this bus is sitting here idle. This is not okay. They shouldn't be doing that. So that's how we reduced a lot of them. We believe that we're accurate now, but to your question, yes, over this, when we continue to look at our routes, we will look to see if there's ways to reduce minutes from certain bus routes, especially the ones we know are currently going over the 5 hours to get them lower.
So is there potential savings then of that amount?
I think it's pretty accurate. Our buses are quite full. I don't believe we can make significant changes. I certainly wouldn't bank on that.
Okay.
Because I've asked them to do an audit of 2 buses a day to make sure the hours that they're saying are still coinciding with the minutes that we're seeing by doing these informal audits every day. but I don't think there's a significant savings to be had there.
Okay. And then just two quickies for Paul. Degree change, you expect that. Degree change, it's in every year for 70,000 and it never gets used. I didn't go back before 19. Is that in the contract, so it has to be?
It gets used and it's rolled into the payroll salaries for those teachers.
So it's in salary, it's not in that line item,
It's carried in that line item.
but it doesn't show.
And we get a printout of, I think it is in early October, as to how many teachers qualified via advanced degrees, so we can add that to their payroll.
Okay, super. And then the 205 account, do you know where, for athletics, where that is at this point?
I don't have
You
that
don't?
with me.
Okay, I'll get it at your next finance meeting. And then one last thing, I'm sorry, the subs I know are crazy. I asked my daughter, who's a teacher, she has 15 sick days in Milford that she could take, even though she doesn't. So contract is contract. But I know for the police that what they do is they've been actually giving incentive to staff that when they're not sick, and they get a nice little letter written up, and they have a financial compensation. Is that any possibility of anything that if you, and I don't know if any of the districts can do it or if you can't do it because of union, I have no idea, but if there's something that, if you're not going to take 15 days, if you're not, because that sub-account is, I think it's outrageous. So I don't know if any other districts have anything creative they can do, because since we have, you'd think after COVID, that would have all come back down again. So,
Right. We're certainly looking for incentives. We haven't talked about giving financial incentives, but it could be something we look at.
something, it's just,
Yep.
it's a lot. Okay, thank you, that's
Yep.
it from me.
It is a lot. Yeah, when you think about a child who's absent 18 days, that's considered chronic absenteeism.
Dr. Semmel.
Yep.
The
Oh, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
was like, where is it?
The back to the buses for a second.
Yeah.
So when you guys do an audit,
Yep.
that's just for the elementary school, is it for the high school, is it for the middle school, or is it for the private school?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, should be.
Because I know that they're like, I'm sure the elementary schools those buses are probably very full, as are the high schools and middle school, but like the private schools and the magnet schools and things like that, those buses are kind of not. I'm curious.
Yeah, I
Talk
can
to you
do a
later.
closer look at that. I haven't looked at private schools myself as
Right.
carefully, so I can. It's a requirement that
Right.
public schools provide transportation for private schools.
No, I appreciate it as my kids go to the magnet school in Bridgeport. I appreciate
Yeah.
the transportation. I'll talk to you later.
Yep.
My question also is about the subs. With that budget, is that for maternity leave subs, or is that just day-to-day subs?
It actually covers all of it.
Covers all of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, and it's not just for teachers; it's also paraprofessionals,
Right,
staff. Yeah. So
yeah, of
there's
course.
there's one line item for I think teachers. And I think there's another line item for paras. So it covers all those positions.
Okay.
Yep. And it has been harder since COVID to find high quality subs.
Right.
Because it used to be like you were a retired teacher and you still wanted to keep your foot in the, stay busy. But we've noticed that some of that part of our population hasn't been coming back in droves. Because there's still, flu out there and there's still COVID out there and people don't want to get sick.
No, I
Yeah.
totally appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then for to Mary's point about financial, is there any sort of like payout at the end if you have your unused sick days when they retire?
I think there is something in the teacher contract about that, right? Do you want to?
Certain percentage of, the days they have.
Okay.
They get up to a certain amount of money, which is phasing out as staff start to retire. If anyone was hired before 2007.
Right, so that was grandfathered out of the contracts, so new staff doesn't get that.
So that
Incentive.
they are de-incentivized to save their sick days.
Right. We support the idea it's a moral imperative to come to work and work with kids.
Oh, I know. I fully
That's what you were
appreciate, and I
Plus
understand
July
that fully.
and August, are
But that
incentives.
right?
So
Yep.
it's. But people do get sick. I also want to make sure I make that. So I think part of the increased sickness is that teachers are always with kids, and kids tend to, and they're in a tight space. So I do believe just part of this is that you got people with people, and so communicable diseases type like that, like flu and stuff, gets passed around.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Semmel, thank
Hello.
you. Hi. So I'm having a hard time with this transportation thing.
Okay.
So when was this contract written, and how often do we revisit these contracts?
It's a 5-year contract, which began at the beginning of this year. Yeah, this is the first year of a 5-year contract.
So when we reviewed that contract and signed that contract, we don't, did we miss something when we budgeted that, we're surprised by now, or?
I think the surprise is that there's been language in that contract, because we've been with Durham this is at least the 6th year, but that language has been in the contract, in the previous contract. What I was surprised by is that all of a sudden they started using that language.
Right, because it was in the,
Right.
But okay.
So we actually had brought in a consultant, and Don Perkins, who had been here for 20 years, was part of helping to make sure that the new contract was put together. So someone who had been very knowledgeable about the comings and goings of the buses was part of that. So I don't believe we missed anything. I think what happens is there was likely a leadership change of, it's not even Durham, that's not the owner, that's not the direct owner. There's a bigger company that owns it. My guess is that there was some push from those new owners to make sure that each of these divisions were making more money, and here's how to do it, and here's how you're going to get this. And that's my guess. It's completely a guess, but if you're a business owner, it may not be a wild guess.
Right.
So that all of a sudden this year they started really pushing on certain language.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
been frustrating for us too to see that.
I can imagine. And then the other question I had, the insurance. You said that our insurance company said that we had claims that were very high.
Yeah,
Is
well
that-
over premiums. Yeah.
And are they, in your view? I mean, when we
Yep.
compare ourselves to others, and what's caused that?
I don't know what's caused it, but our claim rate was high. And keep in mind, claims, I'm not an insurance expert, but there can be a small number of cases that are extremely expensive when it comes to insurance claims. So it could be like lots of people getting sick a lot, or it could be a small proportion of your people getting very, very sick and having very high insurance costs. So I don't really look at that information because that's more of a private information for individuals. So I don't look at that specificity. But the good thing is we have the state plan to go back to and actually make savings, and they've made some adjustments to the state partnership plan, which the town has remained in. So now our employees are going back there. So I think it's a good move, and we'll probably be there for at least 3 years, if not longer. Yep.
Hi, Dr. Semmel.
Hello, Mr. Shively.
So I'm going to go back to these two items of the 500,000 between the buses and the substitutes.
Okay.
Again, I just need a little bit more clarification, just so I fully understand this. So as far as this $200,000 for the bus contracts, these are actual realized increases from this year currently ongoing, and so you're assuming that they will be that same amount going forward, and that's why you need that extra 200,000 in next year's budget, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
So, and is that 200,000? Is it pretty much all these fine print items that you're saying that they're now charging for that they hadn't charged you for in previous years, or is it a mixture of some of that and some other increases in other areas?
Well, I'll defer a little bit to Mr. Hendricks in a second, but the 200,000 is for, I would say it's mostly on the regular education side, because the unfortunate thing when it comes to special education is we could have a child move in who needs an outplacement. The transportation often for a child being transported to an outplacement is about $90,000. we've actually had two situations this year where our special ed transportation went up by about 90,000 times two. So that's in the special ed world, and that always hits the excess cost. So those children hit the excess cost, we get some of that reimbursement. So this $200,000 is on the regular education side.
Well, you see where I'm going with it, right? Because I'm just trying to make sure that these are actual ongoing increases
Yeah.
rather than special circumstances that just hit
No.
us this year because of whatever
No,
reason.
unless they decide to not charge us for these charges, which I don't think.
We're not going to hold our breath
Yeah.
for that, of course.
So I would say yes, this would be a cost moving forward. I don't see how that can be eliminated.
And then again, same thing with the substitute account in terms of you're saying 300,000 going forward, primarily because the amount of money that you budgeted for this year ended up being less than what you really actually did, the actuals that came in from last year,
Yeah.
right? Do you know that they're coming in, that they actually are coming in again higher this by that 300,000 this year?
What are we predicting this year? About 1.3 again this year. And if you go back into, we often usually talk about 3 years of actuals when we budget. If you go back 6 years, because COVID messed us up because there's like some really small numbers in the middle. But if you go back into the 18-19 year, you see 1.3 million also spent. So the good thing is you actually don't see a major increase to our substitute account over like a 6 year. When you look at that, but so you see 1.3.
It's just that you tried to reduce it, but you
Right, and
reduced
then
it too much, basically.
reduce it too much.
I see.
And so we really can't do that. We need to see. And the challenging thing here, and I hope I don't go too deep into the weeds here, so I'll keep it brief. If we filled every one of our empty spots, it'd be well over 1.3 million. Typically, our highest fill rates, the percentage that we actually fill of absent people, is about 80%. So if we were filling at 100%, it would be even a higher cost. So the hard part to predict is how many people will actually be absent, and then how many subs will we have to pay to fill. So we've had days of 67% fill rate, 70% fill rate. So those days are actually a little bit cheaper, but we prefer that the children are supervised by adults. Otherwise, we end up bringing usually the high school gets shortchanged and they bring larger groups into larger spaces. And that way we can manage more kids who are, 16, 17, a lot easier to manage than 6-year-olds. So the sub account ebbs and flows, but we typically, going back, you see about a 1.3 million spent.
So we're just trying to get back up to
Trying to
that
get
same
back there.
consistent 6-year
Yep.
trend, basically. Okay.
Yep,
And I'm just
correct.
trying to make sure that these are actual as opposed to just projected that we
Yep.
haven't seen yet.
Yep.
Right. So, okay.
And
Thank
the
you.
23-24 won't be done until it's done, but now that it's April, it's pretty good accuracy at this point. Yep.
So I'm going to shift away from the substitutes and the transportation for a second and
Thank
move
you.
us on to something else. There's 2 positions in here on your staffing change sheet that are administration related, right? And it looks like one is the elementary special ed, which I believe you said was a teacher position, and now you're shifting that to an administrator position. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if you can just give first the 30-second snippet of why that is shifting to an administrator and what the additional cost is due to that shift.
Yep.
And then my second question is the same thing around mental health. Is that a halftime position that currently exists as halftime, or is that halftime that we're adding to another halftime to get to a full FTE? What are we doing with that? And what's the cost because it's an administrator position? Is that higher?
Right, so I'll start with the second one. I think
That's
you're
fine.
referring to the supervisor of mental health for
Correct.
the second one. So that is a current position in our district. We brought it in under grant funds during the pandemic.
Yep.
And this year it's half paid out of our IDEA grant and half paid out of ESSER money. So since the ESSER money is going away, we're bringing that half back into the operating budget. So half of the cost will remain in the IDEA grant for the supervisor of special education, supervisor of mental health. And the other half will stay in the IDEA grant.
And that position specifically is doing what?
The supervisor of mental health, she focuses on some key areas. The main area that she's focused on is our REACH program. So our REACH program, as you know, is more of a self-contained program here in district for high school students predominantly, but some middle school students as well. Part of her focus has been to try to help students who are currently outplaced actually come back into district and come into REACH. I can tell you that REACH now has one of its highest populations than it's ever had, because we've brought in, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we've brought kids back into the REACH program from outplacements. So there's been some savings to our outplacement costs because of that. That's been one of her primary focuses. She's also been working with bringing in something called the DESA test for our students, which is a way to do a quick assessment on children. The state supports this, and that's more around doing an assessment of all kids to see where their kind of emotional health is. And it's a very quick assessment that the teachers do. And if there's things that pop up about a particular child, we know that we can start providing some additional support to that child. So that's been in a pilot phase this year, and she's been spearheading that piece of it. And then she does work with the other mental health providers in the town of Trumbull. So she actually goes to all the TPOD meetings and connects with the folks at the Mary Sherlock Center. Dean couldn't make it today. If Dean was here, Mr. Catalano, he'd be able to go into even greater depth. I do believe that our budget book, and I was looking for the page here, the supervisor of mental health on page 2-7 also has a description about what that position does. So also focuses on to have thoughts of suicide that we're attending to. So that's another major important part of what she obviously is not like the hotline, but she helps to make sure that we're taking the steps necessary to be as on top of that as possible, as on top of that as you can be. So those are some of the things, and that cost for that particular position is put in here as $88,000 for bringing that half into the operating budget. But it's been highly effective for us. And if you think about it, even bringing one child back from outplacement, even into REACH, we were probably spending $100,000 alone on the outplacement.
Yeah, I mean, that cost savings is fantastic. It'd be great to see the data on what the shift in REACH has been and what you think is attributable because of this position. Yeah,
and we could certainly do that. We could certainly provide that. And like I said, I know REACH they say they're at capacity, but if we need a child to come there, the teachers are great there and doing excellent work. I don't know, Laura, do you know the number at REACH at this point?
Don't off the top of my head.
Okay. I didn't know if you would know that. I know you deal with elementary, so.
That's fine. I can get that at another time. Thank
Okay.
you. That's helpful. And then the same questions around the elementary special ed.
Yeah, on the elementary special ed, actually, Dr. Laura Bennett, who's currently the teacher in the position, is here, and I don't want to put her. I didn't know you were going to ask a question about that, but also in our budget book, we go into the whole conversation about the importance of this position. In speaking with Mr. Catalano about this position, a lot of it has to do with making sure that our systems and our procedures across all of our 6 elementary schools are really being reviewed and implemented with fidelity. A major part of our budget tends to be paraeducators, as some of you have noticed in previous budgets. So one of the things we really have to be sure about is that we're providing the right amount of additional adult support when it's required. And that takes someone to be able to go into certain PPT meetings or make sure they're providing certain training to ensure that we're not over supporting students. Because that over support not only provides too much help for the kids and can reduce independence, it also costs money to do that. So we want to make sure we're providing the right amount of support based on the students' needs identified in their IEP. And that's a major part of what this position will do. Not the only thing. I don't know if Dr. Bennett, if you want to expand a little bit on that.
I can. I'm not nearly as eloquent a speaker as Dr. Semmel, so please forgive me.
Do you want to stand up here just because I know that they
sure.
usually just don't go into like super detail.
Okay.
'Cause she could be here for half an hour talking about that.
Absolutely.
She wants a 30-second overview.
30 seconds. I currently oversee the programming for the 6 elementary schools for their special education and the SRP programs as well. So I am not necessarily completely involved in the oversight or evaluation of the teachers. I would hope that in this, as this position moves forward into administrative, that individual will be able to provide oversight, evaluation, and support geared towards the non-tenured teachers. So our new teachers coming in, making sure they understand what we expect here in Trumbull, making sure that they know our procedures, who to turn to, answer questions, the dreaded CT SUDS I'm sure you've all heard about at some point, and that sort of thing. I know that having the ability to make decisions on the spot in an administrative capacity would be ideal in a lot of PPT meetings, and that is something that is not available in this current role. I'm a TEA member. I do often act as an administrative designee, but again, sometimes you need that administrative power to make decisions without having to go back to the table and consult. And I'm trying to think of all the other things. There's so many I can think of off the top of my head, but they're all kind of jumbles right now. Do you have any specific questions I might be able to answer?
No, I think that's helpful. Again, just trying to understand why the shift from a teaching position to an administrator position.
It is also the oversight of a lot of individuals. We have 27 special education teachers at the elementary schools, at least a dozen mental health providers and speech pathologists, so it's over 50 individuals.
Yeah, I think it's the balance for us of obviously meeting the needs of the kids, and then what does that do from a cost perspective, both for the position and potential cost savings as we,
Yes.
refine how we approach special education to comply with state laws and also,
I think one
what
of
the needs are,
the
so.
involvements of this position in an administrative capacity is that of attending out-of-district PPT meetings and the ability to bring students back to the district as well when it is their time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. And that increase, as you see in the budget book, is $54,000. So, I think that ounce of prevention really can provide a lot of benefits. And we saw that with the ELITE program. We're seeing that now with the REACH program. And I think the elementary program needs that same support.
Sorry, I have one more. Actually, I have a couple more.
Okay.
For the FTE at the high school level for the financial literacy.
Yep.
First of all, can financial literacy cover a STEM requirement? Does the state allow that?
Trying to remember do you remember
I don't know. This.
Do you remember, Sue, if it covers a STEM?
I think it's a separate requirement.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm like pausing on this is because in my mind, it absolutely should.
Should, right?
And I know there's a part of me saying, yeah,
Financial literacy is of humanities?
Yeah, we're baffled by that. That's why I'm pausing, because logically it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's personal finance. Like, they want it to be not the higher level,
Right.
STEM sort of deal, but like that someone knows how to balance their
Checkbook. Which is, okay. Anyway.
I understand all the educators that are working on this.
Right. And so with that, so it doesn't cover that STEM requirement. So my question is, one full-time, one FTE for the entire class of 2027 is going to fulfill that requirement?
Yep. Yeah, see, we have a choice. We have a choice. Don't add the business teacher at all. And instead of kids taking other business classes like accounting and the marketing, we have a fabulous business program. Yeah. Instead of taking those classes, we would say, well, you're required to take this class. So what would happen is enrollment in those other classes would just naturally come down if we didn't add this teacher. So, and the other factor with all of this is when we went to the 8-drop-2 schedule, we actually provided more opportunities for kids to take more elective classes. And so by adding the business teacher and by adding the tech ed teacher, not only do we hit two graduation requirements, we also get more kids out of study halls and into classes and into elective classes that they want to take and we can take and they should take.
Okay, I'm just trying to think about the math of it all. So there are, 2,600 kids in Trumbull High.
2,200 kids,
2,200,
let's say
sorry.
about 500 children per class.
So I'm still trying to figure out how is one teacher going to teach all of
Yeah,
these
well,
classes?
keep in mind it's a
semester
It's a
class.
semester class.
Right.
Right. So
And you have 5 sections of classes you can teach?
So the business teacher can teach 5 sections. So if we just had that one business teacher teach 10 sections a year
Yeah.
at 28 kids perhaps, you have, and you're not going to have them all take it in one year. Right. So you're going to have some children take it as a sophomore, some take it as a junior, some take it their senior year.
That was my other question, is that what's the plan in terms of when should that requirement be filled?
That's all being decided at the high school, and the guidance counselor, school counselor level.
Yeah, like it's going to be like they have to fulfill it sometime in their
Yep.
4 years, not like
Yeah.
you're a senior, you have to take this.
Right. No, right.
Okay.
Yep. And remember, we could offer more than 10 sections. The one extra teacher offers us the chance to offer 10 more sections of business. We might offer 12 sections. Maybe since it's we might need to offer 15 sections in 1 year and then start to scale it back down to 10 sections as the years move on.
And then back to the administrator position for the special education. So, if we're gonna, I understand and appreciate that there's going to be a supervisory role and an evaluation of special educators.
Yep.
So that role would be fulfill that idea. So right now, special educators are evaluated by their building principal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So is it going to be a shared responsibility, or is that new administrator going to take that whole responsibility?
I can't say right now if they're going to take every one of them.
Okay.
But we try to balance the principal's responsibilities, and so we look to see the numbers and try to balance out the numbers for folks.
And do you have any idea how many PPTs there are for outplacement on a yearly basis?
At the elementary level?
Yeah, at the elementary level. I mean,
Dozens?
right, and those are long PPTs.
They can be, yes.
Right, they're long.
They absolutely can be.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you got to go off-site. And keep in mind, part of our responsibility being at off-site is to, number one, make sure the child in that off-site location is getting the education they're supposed to be getting.
Mhm.
But also listening for, can we now meet the needs of this child and
Right.
here with their peers? And if we can, we're going to start trying to move the process along and bring the child back home.
Okay. And then what else was I going to ask? And is there an evaluation to paraprofessionals too, or no? I can't remember if that's something that happened. Like, would that be?
Right.
Is there evaluation of paraprofessionals?
Yeah, there's evaluations of paraprofessionals.
And
yeah.
that would fall under that individual as well, that administrative
I think that
position?
gets divided amongst people as well.
Okay.
Yeah. The main thing is to really be looking for improving the program and finding additional efficiencies. And we've seen when we do this, it is being very helpful to our special ed budget.
Hey, Dr. Semmel, how many total sick days were used last year?
How many? This is like I always say to myself, what will Mr. Cinto add?
Well, I'm taking it easy on you tonight.
Yeah.
Just, how many
I thought you
total?
were going to ask me how many doors were at the high school.
No,
How many sick days were taken
total.
last year?
Yeah. Do you know? I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. It's
I don't know.
understandable.
No, I wouldn't know that number. That's not a metric that sits up here.
Yeah, I need to know that.
How many sick days? Let's be specific. How many sick days?
Total for the whole
that
school
from
system.
all school staff,
Yep.
from superintendent.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And another question is, on the unfunded mandates, what was the total increase to your budget on those?
So on the unfunded mandates, so
Those are the legislative mandates.
yep, the
for
personal
sure.
finance class. You know, we always say a teacher costs us about $80,000. So you have the personal finance class. We're still paying for the graduation credits going to 25. So that other technology STEM teacher would be another 80,000. You may know that there was that mandate that we have to bring feminine hygiene products into all schools, grades 3 through 12. We had originally put that at 80,000. I kept saying, this is crazy. We don't need to go to this level. And I've been talking to some of my other superintendent colleagues, and we have other ways to do that. So we have found a way to reduce that. Those are the recent unfunded mandates. I mean, the number of unfunded mandates is massive. It makes up huge parts of my budget. So I couldn't sit here and start rattling them off.
Reduction in ECR.
Yeah, I mean, the reduction of ECR is, the science of reading is another unfunded mandate, which we think we're saying could cost $400,000, $500,000 to buy the materials, but it's not for next year. They gave us a $200,000 grant that we've been using judiciously, but needs to be used by December of 2024. Well, yeah, they also mandated the Dibbles assessment, which we like the Dibbles assessment, but that was a mandate. So that's that's a reading assessment. We could go on and on and on about the, and they're working on other things now, I'm sure.
Okay, just one more. On the bookstore, how much have you saved in outplacement with the bookstore? I know that the running of it, that's not the problem. How much did you save in the actual outplacement, approximately?
In a year,
Yeah.
each year now. So another one of the unfunded mandates is that they changed the age to which we needed to educate children. So it used to be 20 at the end June after their 21st birthday. Then they changed it to the minute they turned 22, and then this time they changed it to June of the year they turned 22. And we actually believe, mark it down somewhere, that they're going to keep upping that number. I think they would stop once they hit 26 because of the insurance laws, unless that law changed. So bottom line, when they changed that rule, we know other districts started to have to really increase their outplacement costs because they're paying for other people to educate children in the 18 to 22 program. Let's say that our elite program has kept at least 5 or 6 kids per year, which I think is conservative number, because we have no outplaced 18 to 22-year-old kids. Unless something changed,
Which is unheard.
we have none because of the bookstore. So let's say we're saving $100,000 in their education, another $100,000 on their transportation. It's $200,000 times 5 kids. It's $1 million a year to lose $70,000 a year on the bookstore. You know what I mean? So it's well worth the money that the operating expense of running the bookstore. Keep that in mind because we're looking at renting another space to continue with the elite idea. Because we're also talking to other districts to provide them outplacements so they can have their kids educated here and bring in revenue. So we've been talking to a lot of districts. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
You mentioned sending a note to the legislators
Yep.
with the ECR reductions. What more do you think not only you and your staff, but
Yep.
all of us can do in terms of communicating with our legislators about more funding for these? Because we know these numbers are just going to keep going up. We know more and more kids are going to get identified. There's going to be a much greater need for outplacement and things like that. This
Right.
is extremely concerning. And I really think the state and the federal government, for that matter,
Yep.
should be on the hook for some of this money.
I always think, your local representatives represent you, and if you don't speak to them about your beliefs, then they don't hear your voice. So I know as superintendent, I have a responsibility to speak for the 7,000, students that I help represent. So I do that. You could certainly write David Tigliano or Sarah Key or Tony Scott or Marilyn Moore about that. The other thing that's another unfunded mandate is that, part of state Connecticut rules around special education is when it comes to the burden of proof, it's on the districts. So if a parent wants to take their child to a different place, we have to prove that we have the programming here. And now they just changed the rules again that we have to put on our case first. We don't even know what they're gonna say, and now we have to defend against like a ton. So they're really just shifting the balance, and we very much support that children have special needs and they need that, but there's also needs to be a balance with like making sure that it's appropriate. It's a free and appropriate public education. That's what it needs to be.
We spoke a little bit of this offline last hearing, but grants.
Yeah.
How are you on top of that? Like, who's on top of that for you?
Yeah.
How are those sourced education grants? Funding. Yeah, finding new grants. Yes.
So like the Title I, we get entitlement grants like a Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. Dr. Iwaniki is in charge of making sure that we spend all those funds. I think the Title I grant is by far the biggest of those. Right, most of those go to like Title I, the two Title I teachers. Then we have the IDEA grant, which is special education grant. And Mr. Catalano with his team makes sure that we're using those funds appropriately. Those are the
sourcing those and bringing that money in.
Yeah, and a lot of those really are like you just have to make sure you're staying on top of the request and getting the money in. There's other grants that you can go out that are competitive grants, and you always have to worry a little bit about competitive grants because they're usually like, we'll give you this money for 3 years, but then you have to find a way to fund it moving forward. So you have to really believe in that cause if you're going to bring it in. So that's always I'm just careful about looking at grants. Don't look. What's the saying? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Just you have to be careful about. Right. Yeah, that's the other one. So I do think that for the things we need, we use the grants that we have effectively.
Just because we had a lot of parents, not a lot, but parents that did come out at the public hearing or that had written to the Board of Finance, so we were copied, was regarding the TAG program. And TAG hasn't been what it was, years back in the day when my kids were young. And so that's been changing, and I don't want to say watered down, but, we've decreased it over the years, so it didn't seem like it was going to be truly an effective program. But parents that had children in it were, very upset that it wasn't going to be there any longer. And I know from the presentations, the reading and math specialists have basically stepped into that role and have provided that extra incentive and ability for those kids that needed that extra not extra help, but we're able to get more enrichment.
Yeah.
And so that I don't know if it's being communicated or if there's still something else, but it did seem from the presentations and when Dr. Iwana, I can never say your name.
Iwaniki.
Thank you. I always say Iwaba. But even saying the curriculum change and to see how quickly that the Trumbull kids picked up and how well we had done coming out of COVID. So I don't know if it's maybe even just a communication thing, but we actually had a woman that was very upset and was in tears. And I feel like from listening to what's been said and seeing the data that Trumbull's doing a very good job at filling that. So
we are and we aren't. So I think from the academic enrichment, we always want to make sure all kids in the class are being challenged. So whether it be your child who's like picking that particular lesson up super quickly, we want, and the coaches help support the teachers to make sure that they're ready to provide those enriching type activities. But at the same time, in listening, and I sat down with a few parents who had come to me when the Gifted and Talent was cut before. One of their major concerns was the coming together of the kids in the Gifted and Talented program was also enriching to the kids because there was work on leadership and social work, things that they got together, to do. And I think that is likely what they're really missing. I don't want to speak for all of them because I can't, but that's what I heard, that strand as part of this. So we can't replace that, bringing together part. But we do a great job in the classroom, and the kids are definitely being academically challenged. We could always do more and try to find ways. And that's the parents working with the teacher too. My child seems bored in class. What can we do? Yeah. I think we're scaring some of them away, Tony.
Well, thank
Before
you.
they know it'll be an empty room, and I'll just be standing here.
I think that's it for questions. Thank you, Dr. Semmel.
Yeah, thank you guys for your time. I look forward to endorsing the 4% to the full town council. And if you have additional questions, happy to answer them. And thank you,
Appreciate it.
Maria. I know you had to wade through all that too.
All right, I think we're moved to the final item tonight. Maria? You're here to present both the finance department and public events.
See, just the two departments?
That's what's on the schedule.
Okay.
Yes.
So Department of Finance, as you can see, there's really not much change other than the salaries. We added a full-time position to assist us with all the grants and all the requirements that need to be implemented to request reimbursement and to follow all their procedures. And I'm looking on page 42, 43 of the book.
Does anyone have any questions? Good.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
I just got a couple questions on procedures. In reference to, do you have procedures in place for the Mary Sherlock Center now that might not have been in place before?
We do have internal controls that have been updated to make sure that there's segregation of duties as far as someone collecting, someone reviewing, and someone depositing. That's throughout the town. Every department has those procedures.
Okay, so some stuff was changed then from what it was being done before?
Yes. And actually, the internal auditor was just there doing an update review, and I believe they're presenting to the Board of Finance next month.
Okay, and second one was there any procedures or anything changed in reference to bringing the money to the bank every day?
Individuals are required to bring 2 people to the bank with cash and checks. The tax collector has a police officer that escorts them to the bank. They are now coming in the building, and they are escorting them to the bank.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
I just have a couple questions regarding debt service.
Sure.
I'm relatively new, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around a little bit of this. Am I reading this right, that we have roughly about $5.5 million of bonds that are maturing this year? That's the retiring debt? Is that what we're seeing there, principal obligation?
That's on the town side, but if you
Okay.
look on the education, and that's page, so we retire approximately 12 to 13 million each year.
Okay.
A portion is in the budget of the Board of Education, which is on page 106 of the big book. And the difference is in the page. Sorry. Page 416. So there's 5,764,000 in the operating budget of the whole, all the rest of the budget, the debt, other than Board of Ed. Board of Ed is on page 106, which is about 5 million? 5,195,000.
And between, I guess, both of those, like, how much debt is currently outstanding in general? So we're retiring this amount, 12 million a year.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. It's about 140 million, I believe.
140 million
But I don't have it
outstanding.
in front of me.
Along those lines, as I'm thinking about this and how this is going to affect our overall town, when we're looking at some of these major projects that we have coming with, you know, the schools, the potential community center, you know, what's it, $100 million of new debt, what is that in incremental cost to the average taxpayer? Do we have an idea of what that looks like?
No, I don't have that. I wouldn't be able to give you that information. I would have to have my assistant, my financial advisor to calculate that.
Okay.
And even that, it's very difficult because it's based on assessed values. And
Okay.
I will have to look into it, but it's difficult to come up with that.
One other question I had along these same lines is we've talked about, you know, bonding for various things. Is there and the way I understand is we approve the bonding, but we may not necessarily draw it down right away.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is there an estimate in terms of how much has been bonded but yet not drawn down?
So let me explain the process. So
Sure.
we get an authorization approved by the Board of Finance and Town Council, let's say for $10 million. These are projects that are listed that may take more than 1 year, may take 2 years. We issue notes just so 1 year notes so we can go ahead and do the project. But we don't permanent borrow until the project is complete or substantially completed. So it could be a year, 2 years later that we bond. So, you know, we usually bond about 7 million a year, 7 to 10 million for all those projects. But it could be authorizations that were authorized previously that year. That
Right,
makes
so if it's
sense?
$7 million a year, but it could be $14 million of
Authorizations,
authorization that we still haven't even used yet, which hasn't made it into our ongoing interest expenses and the like.
correct. They're just authorized.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
I don't have any more.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That is it for the agenda for tonight. Our next meeting is Thursday, April 25th, for the budget public hearing. So look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.